Hey guys, let's talk about preparation. So the secret to any mirror finish is usually the preparation, what you're doing underneath. Because anything that you do on the base level, it's like building a house. Anything on the base level, if you get that wrong, you're going to have a lot of trouble with the finishing of the final product. Like if you want to get rid of seams, joins, if you're dealing with resins, you're going to have things like pitting and metals as well. Same thing with metal. And uneven surfaces, so you really want to make sure you prepare the parts, the bodies, panels, and all the components properly before they go into the paint shop. Starting with a simple car, like here's a typical Aoshima car, JDM car. I would normally sand these with something like a 800 grit sandpaper. So if I find one here, just get these from your traditional either hobby store or from a hardware store. You don't have to go fancy with these, so I usually go 800 grit for a plastic body like this, and that would be enough. I usually actually tear off strips, something like that, and work with that, and a couple of these will probably just do the body quite well. So what you want to do is you want to rough up the surface. Okay, so get it really not rough where it's gouging it. You want to just get it so almost like, because you can see this body is actually quite glossy. You want the paint to have something that give it something to bite into and not sort of just run off. So you want it to be so the kind of finish you want is sort of, that's the roof. Remove any of the shininess of it, and give it a good once over two. Make sure there's no sort of molding lines, any seams, any what they call pressure marks and ejector pin marks and that kind of stuff, because when they come out of the press in the factory, they usually little pins and it pops off the mold. This car here is actually really good. It doesn't actually have too much wrong with it, so you're just looking for that to keep it, and going through all the nooks and crannies and just getting it really sort of just enough of the paint to bite into. Now, it's also really important to do this for when you're doing a lot of masking. Like I do a lot of Formula One cars, and they have some really complicated paint schemes, and so you're going to require a lot of masking, because if you don't do that, you have a very high chance of the masking tape lifting the paint off that you're going over. So you need to make sure you prepare properly. So preparing is, once you've sanded the body like this and had it nice and almost like a matte finish, and you're quite satisfied you got it right, then I wouldn't put it straight into the paint booth. Give it a wash. So the kind of wash you're wanting to do is in the just standard household detergent, the stuff you wash your dishes with. Wash it in that, then rinse it out. And I usually use cold water. You usually find if the release agent, because that's what you're trying to do, is really give it a good clean up and get rid of the release agent that the manufacturers use to get these out of the molds, is gone. And you usually tell because it's gone from like really smooth and that stuff, and feels quite squeaky and clean. And once you've got that, let it dry overnight or over a couple of days, depending on what your temperature's like. All right, and then just give it a quick check to make sure there's no water in it and it's all dry, and then you can take it to the paint shop. For other materials, like I just go with resin. Here's my FW16. I'm just about to start working on that. That's all resin, that body. Now, resin's a little bit different. I see plastic as kind of a porous sort of material, so the paint that you can use can actually sort of soak in, and depending on the kind of thinners you're using, can be quite hot. And what I mean by hot is you can get some crazing on the plastic, so you've got to watch out for that. But sometimes you can actually just spray straight onto the plastic with spray paint as well. But if you're starting out, I would just say don't go with primer, because it's a good discipline to use for other materials later on. Resin, you always have to prime it every single time. The main reason is because the properties, it's not very porous. It's also quite hard. Even though it may feel soft, this actually does feel like quite a softer resin to the other ones I've used. Is you've got to sand it. I would normally, instead of 800 grit for resin, I would probably go down to 600 for this. All right, and make sure that all the materials, make sure all your molding lines in your seams, and if you've got panel lines and that kind of stuff, are clean as well. If you're finding that they're getting clogged up with all the sanding bits and pieces and all the the mess, then you just get a craft knife and just sort of clean them out. Right. So anyway, with resin, yeah, go around 600 grit. You can go 800, but I've found that if you're doing a lot of complex masking and that stuff with 800 grit, you have a really high chance of the paint lifting off with masking. So I find that with 600 grit, you got less of a chance. And what you're finding too is you're worrying 600 grit sounds really coarse. It's actually not. When you're using microfiller primer like this kind of stuff here, which I'll get into in my next video, this stuff actually fills up a lot of those little tiny sanding marks and stuff, and it's very, very good for that, and it dries really hard. There's various vendors who do microfiller primer, which I'll talk about later. So yeah, same sort of rationale. Sand these, go through all the, every single part, get it really nice and roughed up for the paint to bite into. And same with resin. Resin's actually more so than plastic. You must wash it afterwards with just in household detergent again, and just let it dry. That resin, specifically with I find with this brand, Model Factory Hero, they have such a strong release agent on their resin that you can actually feel it in your fingers, and it's quite icky. So yeah, so do that, and that will give you a nice clean material to work with. Metal. This is white metal, which is you'll find in a lot of multimedia kits as well. Same sort of thing, but I would even go down harsher with a 400 grit, and then maybe go 600 grit. This one here, I'd probably go up to 600 grit because it's such a big piece of metal. This is the under tray of a Porsche 956 Le Mans 24 Eco, a very large model, chipping away at that at the moment. I would probably start with 400 grit to give it a good clean, get rid of any of the just rough gouges, because metal is very prone to gouging, because these kind of garage kits, they're a little bit rougher. Just try and get the surface smooth and all the pitting out and that stuff, right? And then once that's ready, same sort of practice, give it a wash. Same sort of risk with these things too, with release agent on these. You can feel it, it's not the nicest, and make sure it's really clean. And same with metal, you must prime it. There's been a few instances where I don't prime metal, and that's like with things like exhaust pipes and that kind of stuff, because I'm using a specific kind of lacquer which is a buffing lacquer, and you buff it, and the actual metal comes out through the lacquer as you're buffing it out, and it actually gives a beautiful looking finish of exhaust heat marks on the exhaust pipes. Looks really cool. There's a couple of kits I've got on my photo albums you can have a look at in the photo gallery, and that's the Ayrton Senna's Tolman I've just finished. Have a look at that, and also the Ayrton Senna's Lotus 97T, where I did exactly that, where I didn't prime the exhaust pipes. I just sprayed quite light. It's like a buffing lacquer from Model Master, and as it's drying, you just give it a buff with your fingers, and what it does, it starts rubbing off, and just it gives you that nice heated metal look. So that's quite cool. So yeah, hopefully that is useful. I'm going to get into the next one, is going to be priming. What should you do for priming? I'm going to be looking at priming with all-clad lacquers. There are other ones around as well. I'm a big fan of their stuff. It works really well. There's other brands out there too, Gunzi and Tamiya do some as well. So, but I'll go with all-clad tomorrow, and we'll talk about that on getting the body panels and all the other components primed. So hopefully that's useful for you. Talk soon. Bye.